The past few months, companies across the globe have been forced into virtual work. Today, we are talking with a man who has spent the last 40 years building and investing in businesses that help companies work more efficiently. Frank Cottle is the CEO of Alliance Virtual Offices. Hailing from Southern California, Frank has extensive business experience in commercial real estate, finance, workplace technology, studying the future of work, and investment banking. He is a man of great wisdom, and today he is sharing with us why a virtual office might be the best direction for your company. Frank, today we're talking about how to streamline the setup of a virtual business. Would you please define virtual business for us?
Well, all businesses are virtual to some extent, but I think the key here is that a business that really is trying to avoid the fixed cost, particularly in their startup phase, of the bricks and mortar and the furniture, fixtures and equipment and the long-term liability of facility. And in some cases, trying to build a team that the best person might not be in your hometown. So you have to be able to interact with them virtually as if you were all together at the same time. All businesses are virtual in some way or another, but I think we're focused here on businesses that are starting up and want to start up virtually.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with virtual business.
Oh, gosh. Well, we've been in the flexible workspace sector for 40 years, since 1979. We started as a property company building dedicated buildings to host and house what were then called executive suites. Sold that portfolio in 1990. We'd built a new building from the ground up during that 10-year period every 110 days. So we're pretty busy. We built buildings across California, Arizona, and Texas. From there, we started leasing space and converting it to the classic business center model. What today would be akin to a company like Regus. We built those projects, 195 of those projects across the United States between 1990 and 2000. In 2000, I decided that I no longer wanted to own the facilities, so we sold the facilities, but decided we wanted to take a technology approach to real estate. So today, the Alliance Virtual Offices company and some of its affiliated companies really are in a business model much like Expedia in the travel industry. We own and service the client, but we don't own the facilities, just like Expedia owns a business relationship with the client, but they don't own the hotels or the airlines. We find that model helps us to expand quite rapidly, number one. Gives our clients an unlimited choice of inventory that we can represent objectively, and allows us to stay really as a service company without worrying about the physical facility side of things. So we've been doing that for the last 20 years approximately. And we have clients at 1,200 locations that we manage in our network across 54 countries. Our largest client today has 29,000 accounts with us. So we handle everything from a single client just starting a new business on up to very large clients and including government.
Well, clearly you are the right guy to be talking to about how to set up these virtual businesses then. We're excited to have you on. Okay, so for someone who is just getting into the virtual business, where do they even begin?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is certainly your homework. That's the most important thing in starting any business, know what you're doing. But technically or administratively, you have to actually form an entity. And you are probably well advised to form an LLC or a corporation so that the entity contains the business and it doesn't drag over personal liabilities into your individual lives. So that's critically important. And I think when people do that, a lot of people get these startup kits off the web. And you can do that, but those kits really don't help you when it comes to governance and administration. They give you the forms and this and that, but they don't drill into the importance of if you're going to protect yourself and your assets, remaining in good standing, and that takes annual governance and a bit of form filing and administration, which a lot of small companies don't bother with. They just kind of sweep it under the rug. And that, at the critical time, if you ever need it, that is very, very important.
And so where should people be finding that? If it's not the online kits, where should they go?
I think maybe I'm a little bit old fashioned, but I think having a good corporate attorney to start, if you're going into business, choosing someone that you trust, someone who has a good reputation, possibly works with other colleagues or friends of yours, is a good idea. It does cost a little bit more, but the advisory work that you'll get or the advice that you'll get from that versus trying to do a how-to book off of a website is invaluable. Those coaches, counselors, legal advisors that you work with don't just look at your situation, they're looking at all situations constantly. And so their bandwidth of experience is very valuable, and particularly in the startup. You might move on a few years down the road after you've figured out what you're doing and how to do it, but you can only start once. So I would say start right. Have professional advice behind you.
So once people have that, I mean, it really is like setting up, a brick and mortar business.
It's
It's the same for
exactly the
virtual
same.
business.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same start. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the only difference when you talk about virtual is that you're trying to look at today's environment, and let's talk about staffing. Let's talk about company operations for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every company today is international. They have a supplier or a client or a product that crosses a border. So if that's the case, you may need, as you set up your staffing, to think international. So maybe the best programmer in the world is in Sofia, Bulgaria. Maybe the best marketing mind in the world for your business is in Los Angeles. Maybe the best administrator is in Dallas. Well, if you're starting up a company, you don't want to have all those people move to Fort Lauderdale. The cost of that, the disruption of that, the people that say, no, I'm sorry, I love it here in Dallas. I'm not moving to Florida. All of that, it starts to create limitations. So if you're going to put the best team together, you should think in terms of not just your local neighborhood, but globally. We are a global economy today, and you have to compete with other global companies. So if you're starting today, you really want to think outside of your own neighborhood.
Yeah, a lot of the companies we work with say just that some of their best team members are the ones who are not on site.
Sure. Well, technology allows that. And the technology that we use today, which is a lot of video conferencing, I think we've all been Zoomed to death the last 90 days. But it really works. And it's nice. You can use that technology today, and with video, always use video when you're dealing with people. It adds 100%, 200% more dimension to your meetings. So always use video, not just voice. But once you do that, and people get used to it, you're fine. And then you get the team together a couple times a year. And when you get together, it's almost, you're doing business, but it's almost like a party. Everybody's so excited to see each other, and everybody's so great to be able to touch and feel and experience the warmth of the personal relationship that you've actually just kind of held in advance. It's sort of like having a pen pal relationship or a long-term romantic relationship. When you get together, it's just so much better.
Right. It's a good way to look at it.
It's a good way to go, and technology is advancing. So we're seeing limited applications of holographic applications, and we believe that we'll be working in virtual reality offices by 2023. So if you don't get used to that today, the shock and awe of trying to bust into it all at once in a few years and keep up with those companies that are embracing these technologies will be very difficult. You'll be behind the curve.
Yeah, I think everybody's been forced to acclimate these days. So hopefully it's like a soft launch for all of us into the
Yeah.
virtual space. Let's go back. You mentioned, forms when setting up the business, and I know a lot of people get confused between what's a business license. Should I be an LLC or an S corp? When it comes to the virtual space, what are the differences between those things, and what's the best direction to take?
Well, the choice of an LLC or a corporation is a choice of how you want to um, own and distribute your shareholdings or your membership holdings within the company. And that's an economic decision. There is no best. If
Hmm.
you plan to raise outside capital or public capital or capital from a private equity or a venture capital firm, you absolutely want to be a corporation. If you plan to be closely held with yourself and a couple of partners, or maybe it's a family operation, then an LLC is fine. But you won't you can convert from one to the other once without any with complete impunity. So if you start as an LLC and then you want to seek venture funding, and the venture teams, you're advised that, gosh, you're going to have to be a corporation. You say, sure, no problem. So that's a pretty easy transition. The difference between that and a business license is the business license grants you the right to do business in a certain place or a certain industry. You get trade licenses like contractors licenses, etc. But it's not an entity. So if you go down to the city clerk and say, hey, I'm in Fort Lauderdale and I want a business license to open a restaurant. Well, if you just open the business license, you'll be a sole proprietorship and you'll be exposed to 100% of the liability of that enterprise. And that's not a good idea. All of everything you've done is now personally guaranteed, including the hamburger that you just served that might make somebody sick. Uh,
Mm.
that's a area fraught with exposure and liability. So you never want to do that.
Okay. Now, talk to us about virtual business addresses.
Well, there are a multitude of address formats. Um, a lot of people use a mail drop, a UPS store, let's say, it'd be typical of that. But a virtual office is different. That's a mail address. A virtual office gives you a physical address and all the support, but it's also fully staffed with clerical, secretarial, and administrative teams, conference rooms, meeting rooms, sometimes training rooms, private offices, work cubes, workstations, the ability to do hot desking. So, with a virtual office, you can do business there. With a virtual address, you can't. It's a mail drop. And so the big difference when you look across the offerings and the internet, um, everybody likes to use the term virtual office, particularly the mail drop people, because it enhances their marketing. But you can't do business at a UPS store. I mean, okay, I'll meet you at the counter at the UPS store. Let's have a meeting. That's a little silly. Let's stand by the copier. That's just silly. And you have to recognize that. So a virtual office is really, if you're serious, if you just own an apartment building and it's in an LLC and you just have to have a place for the checks to be sent, that's fine. A UPS store is fine. But if you're actually going to be interacting with people, or you want the prestige, because today, and first thing I do when somebody wants to do business with us, I look at their address and I pull it up
Hmm.
on Google Maps and I look at the street view. And you know what? If it's a mail drop, I'm probably not going to return their call. And I
Hmm.
think that's a very
That's
common practice these days because we have that information available to us, and time is our most valuable resource. So we don't want to be wasting our time dealing with people that really aren't qualified to service us. Um,
right. Yeah. There are a lot of co-working spaces now that do offer um, low rate memberships
uh-huh.
just to have their address.
Yes, there are, but
And it's
you have to look in the co-working sector. There are a lot of wonderful, wonderful facilities. Everybody kind of using that term right now. It's the new, flavor of the season, if you will. But when you look at centers, you have to look very carefully from a business point of view. And I'll make a distinction. I will say that individuals co-work. You, Laine might, and I might go and co-work in the same facility, and you're a coach, and I'm a programmer, let's say, and you're going to help me, and I'm going to help you, and we're going to share information, and we're going to socialize, and we're going to co-work. Individuals co-work. Companies need privacy. As soon as you have a team of 3 or 4 people and you have intellectual property and you want to create your own culture and this and that, well, you can be in a co-working or a classic serviced office business center, no problem. But you want a private office then. You don't want to be out in the bullpen. And so that's important. Also, you have to ask yourself when you look at different types of centers, what sort of support they have. Is it just a place where you can drop in and do business, almost like a old internet cafe? Or is it truly staffed and supportive, and what kind of meeting rooms and what kind of mail services do they have? A lot of these smaller co-working centers actually don't process mail. So you have to look at who they are and make sure they have the services that you're going to want through your entire life cycle there.
For people who are just starting up in the virtual space who want this more credible address, where do they go to find these centers?
There are a number of companies like ours, and I would just go into the web and do a search that said virtual office mail handling, virtual office conference rooms, virtual office private office. And you'll see a lot of, and do it with the city or the neighborhood combined in the search where you want to look at things, and you'll find a whole variety of offerings. After that, it's just looking at a few websites, and if you're looking at websites, one of the interesting things to do, you can look at the pitch the company's making, but then you might also go over to their Facebook page, see how active they are. Are they have a great website, but no activity? Is there no energy there? So I would look at their social media pages also before I took the time to call, or before I took the time, certainly, to visit and do a tour.
It's amazing what you can learn about companies via the internet these days, isn't it?
Oh yeah, just about everything. Ask Facebook.
It's scary. Yeah.
Very scary.
It's good. It holds all of us accountable. Now, live receptionist is something that on your website, you guys, is part of your service package. So tell us about the importance of having a live receptionist.
Well, everybody has a mobile phone today. And that's great. But differentiating in business between a professional company that can manage itself versus, hi, this is George, which is the same phone his wife and family calls and their friends call, etc. That's a tell, if you will, if you have a professional front end to your company. So that is important. And it's very easy to lay a second business line, at least it's easy in our system, onto your cell phone so that you can determine what's coming in and who it's from. And that's a big differentiator too. Live receptionists are able to track you down, able to interrupt you, able to carry messaging for you based on individual clients, because most of the better systems, ours certainly does, have a full notes section that pops up to the screen when your number rings, and that live receptionist knows pretty much everything about you. Plus, if they're taking 10 or 20 calls a day for you or a week, they get to know you pretty quick. It's, oh, never let me talk to that guy. That guy's just trying to harass me. I always want to talk to this person. If my wife calls, no matter what, how do you interrupt? It is a live private receptionist, and that's a big value, and it's not expensive. You can have a service like that any place from about $75 to $125 a month, and by comparison to about $2,500 a month it would cost you to have your individual live receptionist sitting at your own
Mhm.
desk, maybe more than that when you figure out facility costs. It's a heck of a value. Um, and a big difference in their business credibility. And when you're starting out, again, you can only start once, you can only make that first impression once. All those old cliches are really true. So having a warm body versus, you've reached X number, leave a message, is a big difference in the way you develop your company and the way you develop
Mhm.
your service culture in your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in your experience, Frank, what types of businesses are best set up for virtual space?
Gosh, well, I'd say we handle everything from government, the major Fortune 1000 companies, on down to individual solopreneurs. So I
Mhm.
don't think there's a type of business that virtual officing is best for. There's no category of business. I think everyone today wants the greatest efficiency, quality of service to their customer, and flexibility. Before COVID, people would say, "Oh, two things you have to have a successful company. You have to have a great product that people want, and you have to have access to capital." Well, now those you still have to have those two things, but you also have to demonstrate for growth, particularly if you're going to seek investment. You have to demonstrate how you have flexibility. When times get tough, how you can operate efficiently. When times are good, how you can expand rapidly at a low cost. All of those things come into play. This is why today large companies, not just small companies starting out, are shifting to flexible workspace models, including virtual offices, in huge mass.
What are your thoughts on established businesses who have, brick and mortars set up who want to transition into virtual?
Well, just imagine the CFO of any company this month or last month walking through the totally empty office that they're paying for, all looking at
Mhm.
all the desks and chairs and all of the expense that goes into facility, and kind of scratching their head saying, "Hey, there's nobody here."
Yeah.
And then scratching the other side of their head and saying, "But the company's running just fine."
Yes, we have heard that so many times over
Okay.
the last few
So
months. Yeah.
the next thing they do is they laugh, throw their papers up in the air and say, "We don't need all this stuff." And you
Right.
need some of it. You need some of it. So to say everybody's going to go 100% virtual is not realistic. But
Right.
companies today are saying, well, let's see, if everybody in my company worked one day from home, I would need 20% less stuff in my
Mhm.
corporate headquarters. If they worked one day from home and one day from a virtual office or a business or a co-working center, I'd need 40% less stuff,
Mhm.
including the real estate. And with tax accounting rules as they are and gap accounting rules as they are, that long-term lease you take, anything over 12 months, becomes a liability in your balance sheet. And balance sheet liability restricts your capacity to access capital. So the more of that you can shed, which is where the large corporations are looking at this right now, the greater your ability to raise capital either through debt or equity. And that capacity, if you're growing a business, is hugely material. And think as an example, if you and I were to go in and make with a pitch deck to a venture capital company today, and I go into that company and say, "Hi, I need $1 million, and here's my business plan." And the first thing any VC is going to responsibly say, "Well, what are you going to do with the money?"
Mhm.
So I'm going to say, "Well, I'm going to get an office. I'm going to lease some space. I got to buy some furniture, and I'm going to hire a couple of receptionists and buy some computers and stuff, and then I'm going to hire some engineers and programmers." VC looks and says, "Okay, that's interesting." And then you, Laine, walk in, and the same VC says, "Well, what are you going to do with the money?" You say, "Oh, I'm going to move into a serviced office. I'm going to have my people work virtually, and I'm going to hire programmers."
Right.
Who's going to get the money?
Oh,
Me or
yeah.
you?
Oh, I am. It's a much
Yeah.
smarter plan.
Congratulations, you just got funded.
Yay.
No, but it comes down to simple things like that. When you think about it, it's very easy to understand the value proposition and how it creates corporate value. And
Mhm.
every dollar that you save that you turn into a bottom line has a multiple valuation based on the type of company you have. So if you can create EBITDA in your company sector, let's say you're in a certain business and that sector in general has an EBITDA of a 20% margin, but you have a 25% margin. Your EBITDA multiple will go from, let's say, 5 to 6.
Mhm.
And everybody will want to invest in your company. And then ultimately, you'll be able to arbitrage the value in your company to buy other companies that aren't doing what you're
Right.
doing and
Right.
convert them to your business model and grow very rapidly. And
Yep.
that's how it happens. We see it all the
Yeah.
time.
Lots of thought-provoking things there, Frank. Um, all right, you, Frank, have been building and selling and investing in businesses for many years now. You've had a lot of success for yourself. What piece of business advice did you not take that you should have?
Can't say it was true. It was business advice, as it turns out, but it was personal advice, actually. And I
What
would
was
say it
that?
was in the selection of a partner. I
Mm,
selected a very shrewd, very capable, very intelligent, and experienced partner to go into an enterprise many years ago when I was much younger. And my wife said, "Don't do it." And I said, "No, no, no. Here's all the reasons why. And I know the business better than you do." And she said, "I know you do, but this guy isn't going to be a good partner." We
mm.
talked about it and we talked about it. And she was so right.
Oh,
uh,
no.
Good businessman, good at this, but a terrible life experience
Mm.
and a very sad ending to the partnership because he ended up embezzling money from the firm.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But the instinct and the importance when you choose a partner, um, I don't want to say it's more important than getting married, but you will spend 6, 8, 10 hours a day with those
Right?
people.
Yep.
Oftentimes more time than you are able to spend at home in your work-life balance when you have a startup company. So choose your partners and choose your structure very carefully.
What should people look for in a partner?
Same thing they look for in a life mate: honesty, integrity,
Mm,
um, ability to be flexible and understand two sides of every picture.
yep.
Someone that you can not just like but respect, not just
Right.
for their business skills, but for their who they are as a person as well.
Yep. All right, Frank, what is the greatest benefit of having a virtual business?
Capacity to grow at a lower cost, to grow more rapidly. It's not in business. It's not the big that beat the small. It's the fast that beat the slow. So I would say the biggest advantage of creating a virtual office structure is speed, the capacity to accelerate growth quickly, and the capacity in a bad market to retract quickly, so that you aren't stuck with long-term liabilities in a bad market.
Hey, gang, you can connect with Frank at his website, which will be linked in the show notes. Lots of good insights here, which force us to ask, what's the most cost-effective and progressive way to move my company into the future? Thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Business Lab.